I will be talking a bit about a project that started last June, so it's very fresh, no data, but just to show you what we are planning in the next 3 years. This project has a short name, COSES, or if you want to modify it a bit, causes. That will become clear a bit later. But basically what we're looking at is consumers, and consumers in a sustainable food supply chain. And what we want to do is to understand barriers and facilitators for acceptance of suboptimal foods. And I will show you what we mean with that later. I'm the coordinator of this project, and it's a collaboration with 7 institutes in 5 countries, which are Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. As we heard already, consumers are throwing away a lot of food. Luckily, there's also some people who deal with this food with this waste in a different way. This is a picture of dumpster diving, which is quite trendy at the moment. It's reusing food that has been thrown away by supermarkets and using it for normal consumption. And from what I've been told, it happens in Ols also. But even though it's trendy, it's not the norm. The norm is to throw away food which is perfectly fine to eat. And actually consumers are responsible for a lot of food waste in the food supply chain. Some of the food waste that we have is unavoidable. It means that it's either unsafe to eat or it's not edible at all. But a large share of the food waste is actually avoidable. And consumers play an important role in causing this avoidable food waste. So on the one hand, consumers are directly responsible for food waste by throwing away food in the household. And we've already heard some numbers today, but the numbers here are from a study in the UK where it's estimated that about 55% of the food waste in households is due to the best before date, and about 75% of that food waste is actually avoidable. It's avoidable because you could store it better, you could cook it before it actually reaches the date, but also it's avoidable because some of these products are actually still edible. Consumers are also responsible for food waste in a more indirect way, and that is because they do not accept foods which are not perfect. And this happens more in some countries perhaps than in others. But in general, consumers will have a certain norm, which is what they will accept. And it's estimated that around 30% of the waste that happens during production and in the supermarket is due to imperfections and a fear that the consumer will not buy it if it reaches the supermarket, or an actual rejection of consumers in the supermarket. And again, some of that waste will be due to, for example, mold or other things which make the food less safe to eat. But a large share of that waste is actually food that could perfectly fine be eaten. And that is what we mean with suboptimal foods. So suboptimal foods in this project are foods that do not look optimal. So when you first look at it, you think, no, I'm not going to eat that. But actually, it's food where the consumption quality is not affected. So the taste and food safety and everything is still maintained, even though the product doesn't look as appetizing anymore for whatever reason. So, for example, oddly shaped fruit and vegetables. There's a lot of fruits which are discarded because they don't fit within certain norms. And although part of these norms are actually regulated, for example in the EU there's a number of trade norms for these kind of fruit and vegetables. So there's actually a European guideline on how curved the cucumber can be, and this definitely does not fit within the trade norms. But it doesn't actually affect the quality of the cucumber. It just doesn't look as it's supposed to look. And of course there's a whole bunch of practical issues with this because it won't fit nicely into the boxes. So, another one is, for example, bread with broken crust. So this can happen anywhere in the process, but it makes it look less optimal or not optimal. Also, foods might change over time, so they can discolor. So brown bananas, for example, some people love them, some people hate them and would throw them out. Great to use for things like banana bread, but a lot of consumers will not just eat them like that. Chocolate is another example. Chocolate will at some point, when exposed to air, start to bloom. And this is not mold, it's just a discoloration which doesn't say anything about the food safety, but quite often it will be discarded. And also products at the best before date or even past it also fall in the category of suboptimal foods. So dairy is a good example, as we heard earlier also. So consumers meet these suboptimal food products at different places and during different times. So consumers might encounter such product before purchase, meaning in the grocery store. And they will find both their products which are closer at the best before date or have some sensory deviation so they don't look as they're supposed to look. Quite often dairy, particularly in the front of the shelf, is quite close to the best before date. And either you or you will know people who go all the way to the back of the shelf and grab the milk which has the longest best before date. Even though it doesn't mean anything for food safety. But there's been studies showing that the willingness to pay for items close to the best before date, it really drops about 2-3 days before for milk. So there's a lot of waste which goes with that. Also, you might find some foods which are suboptimal in terms of how they look. So those go mostly in the fruit and vegetable category. Although you will not find these very round cucumbers there, you might still find some deviation, particularly if you see them right next to perfect fruit and vegetables. And then also consumers will encounter these suboptimal foods after purchase as well. And that's usually because they were optimal when you bought them, but actually they turn suboptimal when you keep them in the house. And of course the best before date is a very obvious one. If you do not eat it, it will at some point go beyond the best before date. And that can happen with any food. But particularly in the dairy category, I would say a lot of the foods are actually still fine to eat. And that's one of the items that we're focusing on in this project. Also sensory deviation, this is particularly due to these discolorations that will happen over time. So the project has 3 main aims. One is to understand the barriers and facilitators for accepting these kind of suboptimal foods. So what we want to know is who are the consumers that accept these foods, who are the consumers that reject these foods, and why do they do that? The dumpster diving is a more extreme example of that, but it would definitely be interesting to compare consumers who have that state of mind compared to consumers who just throw away everything and see why that is. So we want a general understanding of food waste, or why people waste food, as well as focus more on these suboptimal foods. The second part is to investigate how strategies that can promote the consumption of suboptimal foods, how they can successfully be implemented into the food supply chain. And we have here partners in the project that will basically answer question 1, but not for consumers, but for different actors in the food supply chain. So they will go and talk to supermarkets, they will go talk to food suppliers, and look at what are the motivations for discarding products there or not having suboptimal foods in the supermarket? And a part of that will also be looking at the trade regulations and legislation that go with this. And then finally, the aim is to design and test a few strategies that help to increase consumption of suboptimal foods. So the project is set up in 3 phases, and I'll just briefly tell you what we're planning there. So the first step is to do an analysis, and it will be a transnational analysis of these facilitators and barriers towards accepting suboptimal foods.
5 minutes.
And these will be transnational studies, so they will compare different countries, but it will be the same study in each country. It will include some focus group, questionnaire, and also to look at strategies that are already happening. Why do they work and why do they not work? So what can we learn from that? The second part is to do experiments to see what are the possibilities for promoting acceptance of suboptimal food. And the main focus in this part will be on sort of information campaigns, different labels, different text or messages that are being put out. There will also be a large part done on financial incentives. If you do not waste, you will gain money. If you buy this product with 30% off, you will save money. But also we'll look at the influence of the social environment, as well as having consumers actually taste such suboptimal foods to show them that actually they are fine to eat. As I said, there will also be in parallel people looking at the food supply chain and what are the flexibilities of the food supply chain in adapting such strategies. And in the end, we will test some strategies that promote the acceptance of suboptimal food. And to show you what the possibilities are there, I have a little video.
Fruits and vegetables are facing an absurd situation. On one hand, people are encouraged to eat at least 5 a day, a lot of money for families. On the other, we throw 300 million tons of it away each year.
Tout ce qui rentre pas dans la norme, c'est poubelle.
As the European Union made 2014 the European Year Against Food Waste, Intermarché, the 3rd largest supermarket chain in France, decided to rehabilitate the non-calibrated and unperfect fruits and vegetables. So we launched Les Fruits et Légumes Moches, the inglorious fruits and vegetables, starring the grotesque apple, the ridiculous potato, the hideous orange, the failed lemon, the disfigured eggplant, the ugly carrot, and the unfortunate clementine. Now, you can eat 5 inglorious fruits and vegetables a day. As good, but 30% cheaper. How did we do it? We bought from our growers the products they usually throw away and sold them in stores. They got their own aisle, their own labelings, and their own spot on the sales receipt. For people to realize that they were just as good as the others, we designed and distributed inglorious vegetable soups and inglorious fruit juices. And it worked. Our new kind of fruits and vegetables were an immediate success. We faced only one problem: being sold out. 1.2 tons average sale per store during the first 2 days, plus 24% overall store traffic. This initiative increased awareness about food waste.
Mais c'est très bien ce que vous faites. C'est très bien, il y a assez de gâchis comme ça.
It created a lot of conversation in social networks. Over 13 million people reached after 1 month, and had a big impact in the media. Finally, journalists suggested that every supermarket in the country should do that.
Et moi, je milite pour que ça continue, que ça soit dans tous les supermarchés.
Bonne idée.
The inglorious fruits and vegetables, a glorious fight against food waste.
So this is a campaign that ran earlier in the year, and they've They've put this in a few stores, and from what we've heard, Intermarché is now trying to get it nationwide. And although they show some numbers, I don't think it has been like properly evaluated, like really what the long-term effects are. But I think we will see that when they launch the campaign nationwide. So that's it for me, and keep a lookout for interesting things in the supermarket within a few years when we reach the end of our project. So thank you.